Los Andes, presenting here at the Virtual Battery Metals Conference of 2023. I'm Eduardo Covarrubias, the chairman of the board of Los Andes Copper, a company that owns the Vizcachitas copper-molybdenum project in Chile. Just to present in a bit of a nutshell, Vizcachitas is one of the largest greenfield projects in Chile. We recently put out our pre-feasibility study with our maiden reserves, 11 billion pounds of proven and probable reserves. And if you look at it in terms of resources, we have 15 billion pounds of copper equivalent measured and indicated resources, and another 15 billion pounds of inferred. So by any measure, we are a massive deposit. We have robust economics. We run everything at $3.68 per pound of copper, which was the long-term copper price back in January, and that shows that at an 8% discount rate, we're having an after-tax NPV of 2.8 billion US, or an IRR of 24%. So in terms of economics, we are actually a significant, we have a significant profitability. As I mentioned, we're located in Chile, a prime mining jurisdiction with an established track record of development and operation of projects in this side of the world. And more importantly, we're located in the central belt of Chile, which is located in the center of the country, which actually has 4 of the world's largest operating copper mines. And I'll touch into that in a bit. We own 100% of the resource. And for us, this has been very important. We don't have any strategic entanglements. And by that, I mean, we have not pre-committed any of the offtake of the deposit. We have not gotten into any strategic partnership with a shareholder or with an investor that in some ways can encumber the development or the financing of the project going forward. Digging a bit deeper into the project, because we're a greenfield project, we can, and we did design the whole operation with a sustainable mining approach from the beginning. And again, that's a benefit of not having to deal with the legacy of existing operations or decisions that have been made decades ago. To materialize this design, for example, we are adopting desalinated water. Even though we have continental water rights, we believe that mining, in particular mining in Chile, should go into desalinated water, and that's what we're doing. We're also going to be filtering our tailings, and that allows us to reduce the water consumption by 50% from the previous thickened tailings solution. We're also going into HVGRs, which are going to be reducing power consumption. So we're taking several steps to improve the environmental foot of the project and make it as what we see as mining of the future. We are located in, as I mentioned, in central Chile, an area where there's several other mining operations, and that means that we have plenty of existing infrastructure. We have roads, ports, access to power, rail, but also there's plenty of skilled mining labor in the towns around our operation. So that's we believe to be a big advantage. Our initial life of mine is 26 years, and that's obviously in the pre-feasibility, not including the inferred resources, which we believe have a very high potential to be converted into indicated or measured, which would extend the life of mine to somewhere in excess of 40 years. We're going to be producing over 180,000 tons of copper for the first 8 years, and if you look at it on the life of mine, it's over 150,000 tons of copper. So we are a substantial producer. The deposit is actually open in most directions. We can see that we've done some step-out drilling, and again, I'll touch into that in a bit. And we can see that the deposit is completely open towards the east and the northeast, and the same at depth. We've intersected very high or interesting grades deep under the open pit, and that actually creates the basis to explore an underground potential, as most of these big projects have as well. We're trading, and this is where some of the opportunity comes in. We're trading at a 10% of NAV, and part of our work right now is to increase the marketing, and obviously this conference is part of that, so that we can actually expand our shareholder base, increase the liquidity of our stock, and move towards where our peers are trading, and that's again a part of the opportunity of this company. Maybe not worth touching too much into copper itself. I guess we all know that there's copper is obviously key for the drive for electrification, and that means that the deficit we're going to be having in copper over the next several years is going to increase significantly, and we see Vizcachitas as one of a handful of the greenfield projects that can help in some ways cover part of this deficit. Coming back into Los Andes, and just the snapshot of our share capital. If we look at the upper pie chart, Los Andes Copper is controlled by Turnbrook Mining, which owns almost 50% of the company, and then we have Resource Capital Funds that owns 13%, and then the rest of it is a combination of some institutional investors that have come in over time, and some high net worth investors that have been with us for a very long time. And our total shareholder bases, or sorry, shares outstanding are 29.5 million, and that's essentially almost the same as the total shares. There's just a few options out there, and that is actually the only difference is we're not counting the convertible debentures that we have in place, which would generate about 1.25 million additional shares. Going back to the project and maybe touching a bit more into our location. As I mentioned, we're located in central Chile, in a place where we have 4 of the world's largest operations. And just to mention a little bit about that, 70 kilometers north of us, we have Pelambres. Pelambres is the flagship operation of Antofagasta Minerals, and it's actually the operation that made Antofagasta, and by far their best operation today. 70 kilometers south of us, we have Rio Blanco and Los Bronces. Those are 2 mines, 2 sides of the same hill, mining the same deposit. Rio Blanco is Codelco, the state-owned company, copper company, and it's not their biggest operating mine, but it is their biggest resource. And Los Bronces is Anglo American's, one of two Anglo American's large operations in Chile. And further south is Teniente. Teniente is the world's largest underground copper mine. So we have, again, 4 giants, and if we look at some of the historical resources and reserves that they've published, obviously our numbers are much smaller, but we only have 60,000 meters of drilling, and we're completely open. So a deposit like this should have at least 200,000 meters of drilling, and we can all guess or estimate how much this deposit should grow once we've accomplished some more drilling. In terms of our footprint, we have a fairly large land package. That's a function of being very early in this area. Today, we're effectively surrounded by all the majors. We have Codelco, Freeport, Teck, Anglo American, and Glencore, Antofagasta. I mean, they're all here. It's a big mining company territory. Touching a bit more into the project itself, one of the big advantages and one of the reasons why we can have some very good numbers on the project is the location and the access to infrastructure. There's a location, even though we're in the foothills of the Andes and we're a mountain deposit, we're at low elevation. We're at 1950 meters elevation, and that means that we don't need a camp, that we don't need to do heavy winterizing of infrastructure, we don't need to do derating of equipment. So there's several technical and operational advantages that come along with operating a mine at low elevations. As I mentioned earlier, we have power substations in the proximities. We've signed up an LOI to go into desalinated water. There's plenty of towns because of the existence of smelters and other mines. There's plenty of skilled labor in those towns and cities, and there's a network of highways and rail that are available for us to handle the concentrate. There's several ports we can tap into, and because we will be using rotainers or rotating containers, we can actually move the concentrate from the mine to the ports and seal containers that give us a lot more flexibility as to which ports we can go to, and that obviously translates into flexibility and better costs. In terms of our cash cost position, this is very, very important for us. Over the first 8 years, we're going to be under $1, and then life of mine is 125. But that puts us in a very compelling cash cost position. I mean, these projects have to go through several cycles, and having a very competitive cash cost positions ourselves not only for very nice profitability, but also to cover ourselves during the downturns that all these projects are going to face in the future. Touching a bit more into the PFS economics, we're going to be operating obviously concentrate. We're going to have a mill capacity of 136,000 tons per day of processing capacity, and we're going to be producing over 180,000 tons, as I just mentioned. Part of the driver for these economics is that we can keep a head grade over 0.5% over the first 8 years, and that actually makes it very effective for the economics and for a quick payback. Our initial capex is going to be $2.4 billion, and again, part of the reason it's 2.4 and not a higher number is because the infrastructure is already there, so much of the investment is tapping into that infrastructure rather than having to create it from scratch. Our payback is 2.5 years from initial production. That is actually something that was done by design. We wanted to make sure that we could actually keep our payback period down, and part of that was accomplished by investing heavily on the early access on early access to the mine on several fronts, so that by the time the mill is ready and is commissioned and ready to sort of operate at full capacity, the mine does not become a bottleneck. So that's probably the MPV effect of accelerating it is equivalent to the extra capex that we had to put in, but it shortens the period of time in which capital is at risk. And maybe what's most important from this page is this comment on the bottom right side, which is our leverage to copper. I mean, if you move 25 cents per pound of the long-term copper price, that adds over $500 million of after-tax MPV. So the leverage to copper of this project is tremendous. In terms of some of the potential to grow, and as I mentioned earlier, you can see that this deposit is completely open, and I'll be showing on the cursor here. You can see that the grid of drilling and the red blocks, by the way, are 0.5% copper and above. So if you use a lower cut rate, this becomes much more continuous. But you can see how the red blocks are all located in the center of the pit, which is where all the drilling has taken place. We have this gray unmineralized diatreme, which is a post-mineralization event that actually comes up and displaces the copper around it. And most of these large porphyries have this. I mean, Teniente has it, Los Bronces has something similar. So it is a fairly common occurrence, and it doesn't have to be on the center or on the side. It's just contained within the porphyry. In our case, we hadn't done much drilling on the eastern side of this diatreme because this was always thought as a smaller open pit operation. But there was always the interest of potential investors and of our geological team to explore what happened on the other side. And as you can see, we put in a hole in our last drilling campaign, and we were able to show that the mineralization that we see on the area that is fully drilled out is actually carrying over to this other side. What this does is this completely opens the deposit on the other side of the diatreme, and part of the work we need to do going forward is go back to drill this area. Here, just to put it, we started having very good mineralization starting 600 meters, which is equivalent to the elevation of where mineralization is on the other side, with having over 300 meters of 0.6 and above copper grades. On the western side, we have a similar phenomenon of higher grades at depth, and at depth, I mean, continuing extending these holes, looking at sort of an underground potential, we've seen higher grades with the presence of boronite and all the elements that you would expect to find on a large block caving operation. So, just as where we go forward from here, I mean, obviously the PFS numbers are pretty compelling, but this drilling here shows the potential for a significant expansion or further extension of the life of the mine well beyond what we were initially showing. In terms of environment, and obviously nowadays the technical sides are as important as the environmental and the social side of a project. For us, being a greenfield project and looking at adopting what mining is expected to see in the future, we did the changes. I mentioned earlier, we already switched to desalinated water. We also switched to HPGRs so that our grinding circuit reduces power consumption. We're using dry stack tailings, and that is also very important, not only because it reduces the water consumption, but it also reduces the footprint of the project because we are able to deposit the tailings together with the waste rock, and that actually creates a much safer deposit in terms of seismic stability, chemical stability, and again, it's part of the concept of making a more environmental friendly project. In terms of CO2 emissions, scope 1, we're about 1 ton of copper of CO2 equivalent per ton of copper equivalent produced, and actually scope 2 are potentially 0. That's not a function of the project itself, it's a function of the country. In Chile, there's an overabundance of fully renewable energy, so mining projects can obtain 100% fully renewable long-term power contracts. In terms of the community, again, as well as the environment, these are key elements for developing a project. We have a full team, a seasoned team. Santiago Montt, who is now the CEO of the company, he comes from BHP, where he was responsible for initially legal and then also corporate affairs, community and authorities, and actually his experience has been key in making sure that we undertake the development of community relations to the standards that any major mining would expect. That means the discipline, that means having a team experience and the intensity of work that's required for a project to build its relationships with the local stakeholders. We have a full office in Putaendo with a team that's based there and that's actually working on the ground all the time, with plenty of meetings with all different stakeholders and media over there. Just to touch a bit more, in terms of permitting in Chile, as I mentioned earlier, Chile is an established mining jurisdiction, and as a result of that, we have a process that's been proven, that works. We make sure that the technical aspects of the project are done to a level where we can go through a very rigorous approval process and stand all the due diligence that goes along with it. And again, the same thing goes with all the social, environmental, and the engagement with political and regulatory authorities to make sure that we build the momentum for this project. That's I guess in a nutshell what I'd like to present for the project here. Maybe just touching in terms of time frames a little bit. We recently presented the PFS on the first quarter of 2023. And right now we're starting to work on the feasibility studies and on the environmental approval package and strategy, so that we can actually submit that project for permitting in 2025, with the view of beginning production towards the end of 2027 and looking to commence production in 2029. So having said that, I'd like to thank again Tony and Gilbert for the opportunity to present here.
Thank you, Eduardo, for sharing the story of Los Andes Copper with us.